Are you a football fan? Have you ever found yourself wondering, what in the world was that ref thinking? Well, Mike D, the referee, is here to help you. Join me on Whistle Talk. I talk to professionals on the field and in the booth to help you understand what is going on inside the mind of a football official. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Whistle Talk. Mike D, the referee, coming to you from snowy New Jersey this evening. Had about 6 or 7 inches overnight into the morning, so had a little snow day here in New Jersey. But still getting the stuff done, getting the work in, getting the podcast going, getting the studying going. So once again, I appreciate you all tuning in to listening to another episode here of Whistle Talk. And while you're listening, hit that like button. If you're watching me on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Comment, please. Email me anything that you want. Mike D, the referee at gmail.com. Hit me up. I'm always looking for advice, opinions, positive and negative. I'm thick-skinned, as I always say. I'm a referee, so I got to be thick-skinned. But definitely hit up those things and get those algorithms rolling. So now with all that's being said and done, let's move on to the main reason why we're here tonight. With me tonight, I got a guest joining me from nice warm Florida this evening. But I've got with me the CEO of RefMasters, Mr. Sony Tiwari. Sony, how you doing today?
Doing good. Like you said, quite sunny and warm here. But I still wear a jacket. I think I just really like this RefMasters Nike jacket, so I just find reasons to wear it even if it's 80 degrees.
That's good. I like the plug. That's a nice one. But yeah, I've got my vest on and my long sleeve, so I'm there with you of trying to stay warm. Actually, I've got my feet right on top of my little furnace right here too. So we're doing it all here in Jersey to try to stay warm. But Sony, welcome. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us and to come on here today and talk about your RefMasters platform. So again, thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course, always fun to talk with anyone about officiating, especially someone like yourself. I've really enjoyed getting to know your podcast a bit over the last few weeks, and so it's kind of a no-brainer. Come talk with Mike about officiating. Let's do it.
Cool. So for the listeners that are out there, tell them a little bit about yourself first. Let's start off with a little bit of your background, and then we'll dive into RefMasters, the platform and the app, if you don't mind.
I've probably have earned the distinction of being the most ignorant guest when it comes to officiating knowledge on your podcast history, because I am not a sports official. My partners, they keep telling me they're going to get me on the field, they're going to get me on the court, and it will probably happen one day. But I do not have officiating experience, and I always talk about leveraging my ignorance. I work at a company that is a company for sports officials. RefMasters, we're an educational and social platform for sports officials across multiple sports. But my background actually is in education. Here in New Jersey, I actually started my career as a college music professor in New Jersey. And I've always loved education, always been really passionate about helping people learn skills that help them do something, really, to put it that simply. And then that pivoted into a career where I worked at a lot of tech companies, doing a lot of corporate training and helping to hire folks, helping to give people the skills they need, and turning small companies into less small companies. So fast forward a little bit, and I was put in touch with RefMasters co-founders, James Williams, NBA Finals referee, and Kane Fitzgerald, also an NBA Finals referee, but most recently, NBA VP head of replay. So they were working on this RefMasters project. They'd already made a lot of progress on it, and they were looking for someone like me, I guess. It was kind of a no-brainer because we got sports, we got technology, we got education. Those are kind of the triad for me. So that's me and RefMasters. So now I've been working on this project for almost 2 years now and loving every minute.
That's great stuff. And for the listeners that are watching on YouTube or on Spotify and the different platforms where you can see it, I did pull up the RefMasters website, refmasters.com. This is just the main website here where you'll see their story. You see Jason and Kane there, and there's Sony there. this is great stuff. I kind of got introduced to this myself, the site, a couple months ago. I'm not going to lie. And it's been something that I've been on a daily basis. So it's an app more so than the website that I've been on my phone, pretty much on a daily basis. And just the idea behind it and the premise behind it, I think is awesome. So why don't you dive into what the app is doing? And if you don't mind, talk a little football specific, and I'll share my screen here with what people can see on the discussion board.
That's great. So let's say you're an official, you're a veteran official, or you're a relatively new official. How do you get better? Well, of course, you can do education and training. You can go to a clinic or a class. You can watch a video. But we also know that ultimately the way to get better is through repetition. It's through seeing film. It's through studying. It's through being out there and applying what you've learned into a real situation, a game experience. But, when you work a game, it's kind of high stakes. It's hard to learn because you're out there to perform. And what we do at RefMasters is we've got an app. It's available on desktop, but also on iPhone and Android, where you can come in and you can take part in conversation at any time of the day, any day of the week related to learning officiating. What you see up here on the screen, for those of you that have the visual, we have a football discussion space every day, led by NFL referee Brandon Cruz, but also featuring discussion from officials from around the world. And you don't always have an hour, right, Michael? You don't always have 30 minutes even. Sometimes you just got 5 minutes while you're waiting for something to heat up, food, while you're waiting for a bus, while you're waiting for a TV show to come on, right? And that's what we're doing here with RefMasters is we're making high quality education led by the best officials in the world, NFL, NBA, MLB, right here in the palm of your hand. Just making it really easy and convenient to pick up and learn something with whatever time you have in your day. So there's a lot more to it, as you know, but at its core, we're trying to bring expertise from the best in the world and make it accessible to everyone.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that I've definitely picked up on really quickly is how interactive it is. The screen that I just shared, you saw the one film that Brandon posted earlier. Actually, I haven't had a chance to comment on it. I was just looking at it. He did it 31 minutes ago before we started this production, but talking about a back shoulder fade, which is quite common now in even the high school game. Or is it going to be a pass interference scenario? So I haven't looked at it in depth. I just saw what the headline was of it, but he opens it up. He shows a clip, usually about 30 seconds or so. And then he opens it up for discussion and comments. And we've had people from all over the country that have been commenting on it. And it opens up some good banter because it's not always everybody saying, oh, it's definitely this. Oh, it's definitely that. And Brandon will jump on and say, all right, Mike, well, why did you think it was this? And then I'll kind of dive in a little bit deeper. So it's definitely something that, and we do it all year long with film study as officials. And we talked about it on my show here a number of times. We watch huddle film of our high school games all the time. This is just another outlet that it's keeping me involved. It's keeping me mentally involved in now what is considered the off season for me. And like you said, right there on my phone, I look at it between periods in my class. I don't carry my phone with me in school though. Full disclosure, I'm lying. I have my phone with me, but between classes, I'll sit there and kind of scroll through and see what's on there and see what people are commenting on. So it really is great stuff.
On that point, real quick, you mentioned the recent post from Brandon. It's great to learn from NFL referees, right? Of course. But what's great also about what we're trying to do at RefMasters is we're trying to learn from each other as well. Like that play that you just mentioned, I think it's DPI. That's what I think.
Okay.
And I came into it thinking that, but it was also helpful because now I'm seeing in that chat, it's not just Brandon posting, it's other officials from around the country, from around the world, having conversation about what they see on that play. So it's great not just to learn from the pros, but it's also great to learn from each other because that's also how we learn. We learn by teaching. You're teachers, right? So I'm sure that as a teacher, you've found that to be the case, that part of how you grow in your own knowledge of something is thinking about how you explain concepts to another person. So it's really fun to be part of that as well.
Yeah, and like I've mentioned a number of times, if we think in any aspect of life, let alone teaching, officiating, whatever it is, if we think that we know it all, we're sadly mistaken in that aspect. There is always something that we can learn,
Yeah.
and there are people that are out there that have probably forgotten more stuff than I know, and that's great. And this is just a simple resource that's readily available to me that's free. And it's just, again, it's just opening up discussion right now on different plays. And like I said, I still haven't watched this play, but I've seen the back shoulder fade a number of times, and I've seen defenders run into the receivers because the receiver is stopping, planting, going up for the ball. And sometimes that is actually how the play is designed. So good
Right.
for the offensive coordinators in that aspect when you're talking about the back shoulder fade. So but there's a number of different things on there, and for the people that are in basketball, we're in the midst of basketball season right now. There is basketball discussion, there is baseball discussion, so it's not just solely football. It is across multiple facets of sport, and I've jumped on a couple of those. My kid plays basketball and baseball, so I jump on to see what they're thinking too. So it's definitely helped me in that aspect too.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. And on the basketball side, we just had a session yesterday. We kicked off our 2025 series where we, moving forward, do weekly sessions. Now, those sessions is part of a premium program we have called RefMasters University. But
Yep.
everything that we've discussed already, Michael, it's free. We have free discussion with officials, including the pros from around the world, every single day. And it's just at the palm of your fingers right here for free. Like I said, there's paid programs, stuff like that. But I'm not here to like sell a thing. I really just was looking forward to coming here and just talking about officiating, about the industry, about the craft. And I always find when I talk to people like yourself, I learn something as well. Like you said a minute ago, like we've got to always take that position of what can I learn? What can I absorb today? And that's something that I've seen officials model really well for me. That's helped me as a leader.
Yeah. And we're going to dive into just the leadership role in a few. That's something that I definitely want to talk to you about,
Cool.
and how that correlates from your world being a CEO of a company to my world of being an educator and being on the football field or being involved in any type of a sporting aspect. Um, so getting back to the app itself, like
Mhm.
you said that Jason and Kane were kind of the brainchild behind this. What was their motivation for it? Do you know, like, what kind of got them going with it?
Yeah, I've heard the story a few times, and it's a consistent story. It's not one of those stories where they change it depending
Hmm.
on the audience. So I think it's true. They were in the bubble. If you remember the NBA bubble during the COVID-19 pandemic, all of that,
Yeah.
they were in the bubble. So they had a lot of free time. And those two have known each other as officials coming up around the same time through the ranks. And they had this idea about essentially if athletes can have the latest technology and can use the latest technology to improve what they do, why can't officials? Because what they were going around and seeing is when they talk to an official in Washington State or in Missouri or in Texas or in
Hmm.
New Jersey, that they'll get different responses in terms of how we should handle mechanics, how we should think about principles of the game. And that lack of standardization ultimately leads to a lower standard for great officiating. We know there's officiating crisis. We know that in part it's also tied to pay. I just saw an article recently in the state of Oregon, I believe. They've raised the pay rates for officials. They're going to be doing a 4% increase each year for the next few years. Well, that's
Okay.
great, of course. But one of the things that drives an increase in pay is an increase in the standard of performance,
Yeah.
right? And so what James and Kane saw was when they talk to officials around the country, they're hearing different things about what's important or about how things are done. What's the mechanic on this type of play? How do we interpret this type of situation? And so trying to fill that knowledge gap was really important to them. But then the other thing they saw, they had the advantage of the relationship between the two of them coming up through the ranks, right? They spent years traveling on the road, working Division 3, Division 2, eventually getting into the G League. And it's hard. Being an official is a hard job. It's not for someone that's looking for glory and adoration for people. So what do you do when the going gets tough? You've got someone to talk to.
Yeah.
And what they found is that younger officials, they didn't have those places because nowadays everyone is hanging out here. Everyone's having their relationships here, right? So they were looking for a way to fill what they would call the connection gap.
Hmm.
And then the last thing, I think that last big motivator for them, Mike, was the way that referees are treated and seen by the sporting public and the public at large. We know the abuse that referees endure, and that is a major obstacle for people continuing to persist, continuing on this journey of
Yeah.
officiating. And what they wanted to do was create a platform that would humanize referees as well, that would show people how a referee sees the game, how a referee feels about the game, and the fact that referees are not robots. Because, Michael, before I joined RefMasters, I kind of thought referees were robots because I didn't know any.
That's
You know?
okay.
So when I
Understandable.
started meeting them, I'm like, wow, referees are really cool. They're interesting. Their job is hard, you know? So I think that's really what it was. Their vision for RefMasters was trying to solve those gaps, create standards, have better training and more knowledge, create a connection between a community, and ultimately humanize referees.
Yeah, and again, it's relatively new. The platform is relatively new for me. I honestly don't even remember where I got turned on to it, but it's definitely something that I wanted to bring out to other people's uh, to eyes because again, um, I kept on referring to the one play, the back shoulder fade play. But
Yeah.
I've been on there and I've had discussions with Brandon about mechanics and little things like that. And I've answered questions. Well, in the NFHS, this is what the ruling is. And he's come back, okay, well, how do you think it's ruled in an NFL game? And we've had open discussion and talking about the different levels with different things and talking about not just rules, but interpretations. He's showed videos of good mechanics. He showed
Yeah.
videos of what are your feelings on this mechanic, and I've, like I said, I've definitely learned. Now I'm an umpire, which is what Brandon is too. But in the NFL, he's in the offensive backfield. I'm on the defensive backfield, so
Yeah.
our mechanics are a little bit different. But he's brought on mechanics of the short wings, which tend to be the
Mhm.
most scrutinized position on the field, minus the white hat, because the white hat takes all the
True.
brunt because everybody knows the white hat's name. Nobody knows the
Right.
wing officials' names. But the wing officials are the ones that are getting the spots, and they tend to be scrutinized a lot. And oh, I can't believe that person did that. So having that platform, it's something that re-educated me again, talking about mechanics. So if you don't mind, if you can kind of jump back and forth, are you doing stuff with mechanics in the basketball industry, in the baseball industry? Because my son's got baseball practice later on tonight, indoor winter session. So it's
Yep.
rolling around. I think pitchers
Yeah.
and catchers start next week for MLB.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let me speak to that. But in a second, you just talked about your interactions with Brandon, and I know you can speak to this because you've been in the app now for a little while. What's so cool is the heart that these pro officials have to give back, to really teach people in the craft. That's
Yeah,
what's been so great. And I see it not just with our RefMasters team, by the way. I see it with officials, high level officials across the board working on other projects as well. It's a really neat community. Not every community is like that, where
yeah,
people have that sense of responsibility of, let me take time to actually talk about this with someone. And there's not a lot of benefit other than just trying to help someone grow in their own relationship to the craft of officiating. So I love seeing that. And I know we're going to talk about leadership a little later in our chat, but that is another thing that I think these high level officials model really well and that I've learned from. But going to your thing about mechanics, it's a great, great question because people on the football side might be thinking, well, Brandon on the NFL, they do the 7-person stuff. That doesn't really apply to me. But what we do in football, same thing as we do in baseball and in basketball. We talk mechanics, but when we talk about a play or a concept, we explore the different relationship of how it would be applied differently depending on what mechanic system someone's using. Because what we found with a lot of the discourse around officiating, and you probably, if you've been in a Facebook group, an umpire or a referee Facebook group, you know that there'll be a lot of arguments about the rules,
yeah,
right? And the rules will be different depending on the level, depending on where in the world or in the country you're working, right? We can squabble over rules, but ultimately we can pull up a PDF and say, well, my rules say this, right? What we try to do at RefMasters is we try to talk about mechanics because mechanics have some differences, but a lot of similarities. But even above mechanics, we talk principles. Because what we find at RefMasters is that the principles of great officiating are the same, regardless of what level and what location you're in. And to make a point here on the mechanics part on football, ultimately, mechanics is designed to put an official in the best place at the right time as frequently as possible. That's how the mechanics are designed, right? Well, that's a principle. At RefMasters, we call it right place, right time. We have another principle, eyes on the play. Another principle, coverage as a team. So we teach principles, and then we get into the mechanics level, and then as needed, of course, we'll have the rules discussion, right?
Yep.
But you can go anywhere for a rules discussion. You could go to look it up in a document, right? So we talk about it. It's important, but it's kind of a given. Like, you have to know the rules. But yeah, we like to really talk mechanics and principles, and it's the same on basketball, because 3-person is what they do in the NBA and mostly at college and in high school as well. But we know a lot of folks at the high school and the rec level that do 2-person.
2 people.
So when we do a film breakdown, we'll talk 3-person, but we'll also discuss 2-person, and the principles apply regardless of how many people are in that particular mechanic.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And I kind of want to backtrack on your beginning part of your sentence statement, talking about Brandon and talking about our community and officials, because it's one thing that I've learned since starting this podcast, which I'm just about at my 1-year anniversary here, by the way, too. Got to throw that in there. But yeah, appreciate that.
It's awesome.
Glorified plug myself. But the human element that you've talked about, a year and a half ago, I'm sitting there watching people on TV and not thinking anything of it. And then I started reaching out, and I'm sitting here referring to Brandon by first name basis. I have had a conversation now with Brandon, and Brandon is now working the upper echelon of the sport world for me in football. And I have discussed, and excuse me, I've had on past guests that were working the head referee of the Rose Bowl and different things like that, where a year and a half ago, I, kind of like you, I'm like, oh, look at these people out there. Well, they're humans, and they are out there to help. And I've been lucky enough that, well, I'm brave enough just to try to reach out to them. So my wife makes fun of me. I'll talk to anybody, and yeah, that's true. And you never know until you try. And somebody's going to say, no, it's not for me. But I've found that 99% of the people that I've reached out to have reciprocated back in some fashion. Yeah, Mike, I would love to do that, but my schedule won't allow it. That's typically the no that I get. But anything that I can do to help out. So the officiating community across the spectrum, I think, has been something that's fantastic. It is our own world. It's our own, I don't want to say fraternity, because it's not gender neutral anymore. It's just a community. That's all it is. So that's great stuff.
Yeah, along those lines, real quick, it's interesting. If you are listening to this and you are already in the RefMasters app, one thing I want to encourage you to consider is posting. Share a play, share a question. I've talked to folks about this, and it's a bit of a process because it can be intimidating. You're like, well, this is Brandon Cruz, right? Greg Wilson, another NFL referee. He's going to be on our session. We're doing a session tomorrow. Our first, or not our first, but our next RefMasters football session is tomorrow evening. So he's going to be on, right? You mentioned Tuta. You mentioned Daniel Young, right? These are high-level Division I folks, right? It can be a little intimidating, but what we're trying to do is create a culture at RefMasters where we can put our thoughts out there, we can put our perspectives out there and learn from each other. And it's okay to be wrong or to make a mistake. What's so powerful is seeing these pro officials like Brandon or James Williams, NBA Finals referee. He'll post, and he'll post this clip from a game that he recently worked, and he'll say, look, I was out of position on this drive, right? I blew my whistle, and I should have trusted my partner on this. That is so powerful because it is tough. I've learned as an official, it is tough, the relationship you have to have with being right and then acknowledging when a mistake is made, because it is not like a regular job when you're like, oh yeah, my bad on that. That's not the relationship that officials get to have with being correct. So it can be hard because we want to be correct all the time. But it's great. What we're trying to do at RefMasters is encourage people to share their thoughts, share their questions. There is no dumb question. If you have the question in mind, I can promise you, in our community of thousands of people, over 35 countries in the world, there is someone out there that's got that question as well. So Just had to put that out there because it's been a topic of discussion within our team. How do we get even more people to share their comments? Because we know they're engaging, but sometimes it's a little scary.
Now, talking about the community of people that you have involved, not your specific team, but the people that are jumping on and joining the app, are you finding out that most of them are officials in general? Do you have people that aren't an official that are maybe a coach that are there to try to learn a little bit more? Even just the general person. Can my wife sign up and get on there and just watch and kind of learn about the different sports?
Yes, absolutely. Right now, our core audience in RefMasters is officials, referees, and umpires. But we have a number of folks that are not officials that are also in the platform as well. We've got a number of coaches. I just saw a basketball coach the other day that joined the app. And what we're looking to do in the future is to have more programs and spaces for those
Okay.
individuals. One of the big things in solving the referee shortage is finding that new influx of talent. And there really is no better candidate to become an official than someone that's played or coached the game. It's just the truth. And so many of you that are listening to this that are officials, I'm sure you've got that story because I've heard it so many times. Yeah, I used to play high school. I used to play college hoops or football, right? And I wanted to stay close to the game. I wanted to stay connected. So we've got programs. One in particular we call Rule IQ, Mike. So we've done this with certain schools on the basketball side, but we're looking to expand into baseball and football, where we go in and we talk to a basketball team, a college basketball team. We break down film from their games and we give them the referee's perspective of this is why the foul was called, or this is what the referee is looking at. This is what you
Yep.
can get away with, by the way, right? And then we also give them feedback on, okay, well, maybe this was not the right call, or maybe this was a gray call. What's the best way to communicate with an official in this situation? So we're trying to raise the overall IQ. That's why we call the program Rule IQ. We're also trying to bridge that gap, that empathy gap that we were talking
Hmm.
about between players and coaches and referees. So that is a smaller part of what we're doing in the RefMasters right now, but in the future, it's going to be a big part.
Yeah, and I know that you guys have on there the quizzes and different things like that, or the different questions. So
Yeah.
again, if you think you know it all, go on there and refresh your memory. Then, like, there's no reason not to take a look at some of this stuff because it's out there for you. It's readily available, and again, it'll open up a discussion. I'm part of a 6-person crew here in New Jersey for our officials association. We
Mhm.
work 6-person games predominantly, 7 for the bigger games.
Mhm.
90% of the time after the games, we go out and we have a beer. And we sit around at a local bar, have some hors d'oeuvres or something like that, some appetizers, and we're talking about the game again. And we're opening up about it. And I'm very lucky. We always talk about it. We put our egos aside and we'll sit down there and my crew chief will be like, Mike, you blew that call. And I'll go back to my crew chief. No, Al, I had that right. You blew that call. And we'll have an open discussion about it and then we'll leave.
Love it.
But we're going back and forth and we're continually learning. Well,
Mhm.
this is kind of like doing the same thing and it's now going on now and you're seeing different things. And again, I posted a comment on one thing and I didn't get ripped for it. I don't want to say I got ripped for it, but pretty much everybody else kind of disagreed with my thought process on it.
Yeah.
So I went back and I read theirs and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I see. I was wrong. You're right. And I didn't take it off because I want it up there because it was a mistake that may have been made or it was a question that somebody else, like you mentioned, somebody else may
Yep.
have had or had the same thought process. And I got re-educated on it. So again, it's a platform, it's a quiz, it's the IQ, it's all those little things that we're trying to work with. I'm trying to work with my kids, my son particularly. My son is a very emotional athlete. He plays 3 sports, and
Yep.
when things don't go his way, we're working on him remaining composed and different things like that. Well, he had a basketball game last night and he got called for a foul and I could see him and then I saw him take a breath and he's like, all right, whatever, let's move
Right.
on. So it's little things like
Real,
that we're all working on.
well said. How's that going, by the way? With you think you might turn your son into a referee one day?
I don't know. All of his friends walk around and they call me Mike D the referee. So they are all liking it and they're understanding. So it's definitely
Okay.
kind of opened them up to it a little bit. in his mind, he's going to be more of the professional athlete, but
Yeah.
I don't
Yep.
have the heart to tell him that that professional athlete, God bless, he does make it to that level. They still usually peter out in the 30s to 40 years old. So
Yeah.
you got to work on something else afterwards.
That's right.
And somebody that just worked the Super Bowl was a former NFL player. So it's always an option. So he definitely does know that that is always going to be out there for him.
That's good. That's the path. Let's see what happens there with what's your son's name?
Braden.
Braden. All right,
Yep.
we'll get Braden in the app one day. One
Oh,
day.
beautiful. Yeah, he's all about apps. So we'll definitely get him going with that. Um, So now I wanted to talk to you. One of the big things really wanted to talk to you about is about leadership and about what you guys have going on at RefMasters, what you have dealing with being a leader and different things like that, and how that correlates to a person like myself, an official, and how RefMasters has an effect on us officiating and becoming leaders, such as possibly my son one day. So, what is your thought process on leadership?
Yeah, well, that's a big one, but it's been really humbling to get to know officials these past 2 years. When people ask me, what do I think about officiating as a profession? What I've been telling them now is officiating is like a combination of being an air traffic controller and a psychiatrist, which is a crazy combination.
Yes.
It's like you've got to do both of these things. There's a lot of technical and information processing and pattern recognition and communication. And then there's a lot of human empathy and emotional control. It's a very unique occupation or vocation to pursue. And obviously, from that, there is an abundance of leadership lessons. And what we found at RefMasters, as we've been building this team and bringing in these pro officials, we've talked about Brandon from the NFL side. I mentioned James Williams and Kane Fitzgerald on the basketball side. Most recently, Brendan Miller and Malachi Moore, MLB umpires, running our RefMasters baseball division. What we started learning was that the concepts, I should say the principles that we
Hmm.
teach, I mentioned those principles, that we could apply those in a business context and a general leadership context as well. I mentioned a few already, like eyes on the play. I'm talking about what do we focus on? What do we filter? How do we filter out the noise to put our eyes on what's most important? Well, that's got an obvious connection to leadership, regardless of where you are, right?
Yeah.
Right place, right time. How do I put myself in the right place to take advantage of opportunities as they come in front of me? How do I position myself most effectively and consistently put myself in position for right things to happen, right? One of the ones that's really stuck out to me recently has been this idea as I hear about it. They call it different things depending on the sport, but in basketball, they say start, develop, and finish.
Okay.
Let a play start, develop, and finish. And as a leader, that's been a really interesting thing for me as I've been working on this RefMasters project. I think as a leader, we have a passion. Hopefully, we have some knowledge about whatever it is, the thing that we're leading, and that could drive us to intervene quicker than we should.
Yeah.
I see it all the time, whether it's when do I talk with a person, when do I try to solve something that might be a problem, when do I respond to something? We always want to get ahead of it, but we got to sit back. And I see so much of training in officiating is about learning to process the play and slowing down internally. So that's been a big lesson for me as a leader, watching that. And I've applied that. It's not just lip service. I've applied that when negotiating, when sitting down with an external partner and negotiating a
Okay.
price on something, where normally I would be quicker to try to get the deal and try to figure it out. Start, develop, and finish. Give it time. So that's just one example. We could talk a long time about that one, Mike, but interested in your thoughts on that.
So actually, I've got a different phrase that I like to say, and some people, if the listeners have probably heard me say it, I tell them to let it marinate. Let it
Ooh, that's
just
good.
sit for a second. Let it marinate. Let your mind process it. And it's actually, again, talking now with my son, my 13-year-old son. He tends to get himself too emotionally tied in the game. And right now, well, he's a bigger kid, and basketball wise, he plays more of a forward spot. But on his travel team, their point guard got injured. So now he's playing point guard, which is a complete different thought process. And you could see that sometimes the game speeds up for him a little bit too much. And again, I'm trying to teach him, let the play marinate. Sony, I think you accidentally muted your microphone. There's a hand button. There you go. Um, so it's something that I'm trying to teach him. And if you're going back to the leadership aspect, letting it marinate, well, that's what a point guard's job is to do, is to lead the basketball team and let it go from there. And his coach is telling him, Braden, just slow down, let the play develop. You're going to see it instead of trying to rush it up the court. Let it develop for you. So yeah, it's all aspects of life, and I use it in the classroom too, because I've been teaching for close to 30 years now, and it's something though that I have to say has come with more experience, and that's where having a good mentor in the officiating world, in the CEO world, in the business world, on the sports field, wherever it may be, having a good mentor has kind of taught me, okay, let it marinate. Sometimes I'm dealing with high school age kids. Sometimes kids are kids, and they say things, and very easy you could jump down their throat. As a parent, I know I've sometimes done that too. So parenting is being a leader too. So it's all different walks of life. I mean, we're tying this into a lot of different things here.
Yeah, I love it. It's really, really good, Michael. And along those lines, what I see from officials is that they can't always lead with their whistle or their flag. They have to lead by influence. And that's a lot harder. That's a
Yeah.
nuanced game. It's not just about, well, I just blow my whistle. We talk about when it comes to game management. As an official, is my job to assert control over the game? Maybe sometimes if it's getting out of hand, if it's becoming overtly physical, or not just physical, but if it's becoming dangerous, right? But ultimately, I want to keep a flow. I want the game to flow. Our slogan at RefMasters is run the game. And that comes down to a number of different attributes, but principal among them is, how do I influence this game instead of just thinking about asserting my authority on it? And like what you just said with your son and being a point guard, that's what a point guard does, is they've got to influence the outcome. And it's not always about dribbling the ball all the time. It's about creating the conditions in which your teammates can also thrive.
Yep. Now I was muted. No, sorry, I had to
What were
cough
you saying?
before I muted myself. But
Oh, for
yeah, that's just something now that with talking with my son, and I know personally has had an effect on me from being a player, moving on to being a coach, and now being in the officiating world, is letting it play, running the game, and different things like that.
Yep.
But just letting it happen. When I first started officiating, I was very quick with the flag. Now the flag stays really deep, and I'm making sure that I'm seeing what I'm seeing, making
Yeah.
sure that it's affecting the play itself,
Yep.
and then I'll throw it if need be. Safety, I'm throwing it right away. We don't want anybody getting injured. Safety ones we're calling all the time, but the holding penalties, I really let that one marinate. I know a lot of officials talking about it, and go back to Brandon's DPI or back shoulder.
Yeah.
That's one that I'm gonna kind of let it marinate. Did
Yep.
the defender run into him and have an effect on him playing that ball? Was it designed that way? Did the receiver catch the ball? If he caught the ball, why throw a flag? What's the point? It just slows the game down. So it's a lot of different things like that we do talk about.
Yeah, another one that comes up on the football side, but I see it everywhere now, is this idea of, I heard the language in a baseball call, not getting sucked into a play. But on football and in basketball, I'll hear this of keeping an outside in view instead of inside out. And that's really helpful when you think about perspective. Like, you get too close to something, you think you're getting closer so you can see it better, but you're seeing it worse.
Yeah.
And this idea of, like, I can choose between proximity or I can choose between angle. And angle over proximity most of the time is what I've learned from officials. And I think that's a really good lesson for leaders as well. Like, just keeping perspective is really important. In basketball, sometimes in the trail position, they'll say, keeping a big picture view,
Yep.
right? And so much what I see when we're breaking down film in a RefMaster session on any of the sports is sometimes we have a tendency to try to get too close to something and we actually see it worse. It's like, well, that's a lesson for life, right?
Yeah, and now I'm going to tie that into the football mechanics. We always say it, especially for the wing guys. Just because the play goes away from you doesn't mean that you're off. You actually now have the biggest picture that you get to see because you're triangulating everything in. So for the younger officials that are out there, understand you actually have the best view of times. Now, again, another thing we like to say is we don't want to fish in somebody else's pond. If I
Yeah.
saw a hold on the far side of the field,
Right.
I'm not going to try to throw my flag 55
Right.
yards across the field, but I'm going to communicate with my official and say, hey, Mike, keep an eye on 15. He may have held on that play, because sometimes we are too close to the play and our point of view does get narrowed down. But yeah, keeping that broad spectrum and keeping everything open is definitely something that you got to work with. And sometimes your best leaders do just take a step back and
Yeah.
then see it all.
That last thing you were just talking about, it's one of the other big points that I've been seeing. What differentiates a good official from a great official? You talked about, like, don't dip into my pond, so to speak, right? Now we know the data. We know the data about making a call out of primary. In any sport, the most accurate that you could be out of primary is going to be usually less accurate than the least accurate in primary. That's
Yeah.
how the data pretty much plays out, right? That being the case, what I've seen is the next level of officiating. Folks that are thinking about it next level, they've gotten to a point where they understand coverage is a flexible guideline. And ultimately, it's about who has the open look. And it's about trusting your partner, because the mechanics, there's lots of layers to it, but ultimately it's about how does the mechanic is a team concept. The mechanic isn't something you can never, Michael. I've learned this now. If you're working in a 6-person crew, like you said, you can never have a perfect mechanic game on your own. You
No.
can only have perfect mechanics if the rest of the team is also engaged in the same pursuit. And that is a very obvious point, but I think it's overlooked. And what I've seen from the highest caliber officials is understanding when do we make exceptions to the first layer of understanding with mechanics. It's kind of like when you learn a language and you learn how to use prepositions or how to use articles, etc. And then you learn all the exceptions, because you see the best writers, the most powerful writers, are able to find the exceptions to the rules of
Yep.
language. And it's the same thing in mechanics. I imagine, Michael, when you have those games, you said after the game you go on, you have have a drink and maybe have a bite and talk with your crew. You have those games probably where it just clicked,
Oh yeah.
and you knew like when to dip in when the other person didn't have the look and you had it, and you knew when to back off and the trust. And that's what I hear from officials. It's almost something, I don't say magical, but there's something in the air. There's something very powerful that's unspoken when the crew is really in it together. And that's awesome.
Yeah. And those are the games that we pretty much kind of disappear into the mist, which are the games that I like. My crew chief always says it, like, we're here to spot the ball and wind the clock, let the game happen, let the plays play.
Yeah.
We're not there to throw the flags. We're not there to always blow the whistle and stuff like that. We're there to manage the game, lead with our voice, not our whistle and our flags, but lead with our voice and our presence, and get these kids having the best experience they can being involved in the sport that they love. So that's one thing that I've really taken from my crew chief. As hard-headed as he is sometimes, I say that in jest. He's a great guy.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Again, for me as a non-official, it's cool to hear and have these conversations with folks like yourself, because there's always something new. There's always something new.
Well, that's a great segue. Where do you see the future of RefMasters going?
Yeah.
Where's the
Well,
trajectory here?
the future of RefMasters is the future of officiating. Where is officiating going? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, but I think a lot about technology. Think about technology a lot. What is the role of technology? And we have seen in every sport to a certain extent, whether it's using tracking, using cameras, increased use of replay, there's a big shift that's going to continue to happen in
Mm-hmm.
officiating. The future of officiating is always a human-led profession, because the human element is core to officiating a game well. I am utterly unconvinced that we'll just have machines out here anytime in our lifetime. I think it's
Yeah.
impossible. And it's funny because even the officiating public that is relatively ignorant about what officials really have to do, if you ask them, if they would want every single perceived infraction called in a game, they wouldn't.
Nope.
They wouldn't. So there's always a human element here. But how, as humans, as officials, are we augmented? Are we improved by technology, whether it be in game, which will continue to increase in its use, but also in how we leverage machine learning, artificial intelligence to sift through all of the data points that's coming in. Because one of the great things, Mike, you've seen in the last 5 to 6, 7 years is it's much easier to get film of your game now.
Yes,
You know,
very much so.
In the past, you have to be working really high level to have film. Now, almost everyone can get access to their film.
Yep.
And as we have more access to film, what does that mean? We've got more data, more information. But you're a teacher, you know this, Michael. Just because you have more information doesn't mean you have more knowledge, right?
No,
Information,
it's what you do with that data.
You've got to make sense of the data. And these are incomprehensibly large sets of data. So what we're excited about at RefMasters is how do we make sense of all the data? And how do we use that data to show an official, here's what you're strong in and keep doing. Here's where you need to work on. And then also sharing that information with decision makers, assigners, coordinators. And then with our platform, of course, we've got RefMasters University. And how do we bring technology into how do we bring education into that as well and give people what they need when they need it? So that's a big thing I'm excited about, technology and how we make sense of the data. Interested in your thoughts on this.
You got my wheels turning here because now I'm thinking about all the different technology that is already out there on the athlete side. And if you think about it, baseball wise, and seeing the pitch velocity or spin velocity and the spin rate, the spin rate, the swing velocity, all those little data points that they have on how they're trying to improve their ball players, throwing strikes, making contact, different things like that. But then on the umpiring side, you make one mistake and you've ruined the game. But on the baseball side, you've got all these data points. And if you make 7 mistakes for every 10 times you get a chance, you're going to the Hall of Fame with a 300 batting average. So I'd like to see more umpires in the Hall of Fame for having a 300 average. I mean, the man just retired. I don't know him personally, but Angel Hernandez has taken a lot of heat over the last couple of years because of some of his calls.
Sure.
I'm sure it was better than 300% on being correct or incorrect.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's interesting, but yeah, I'm a data-driven person myself. I love watching film. I love researching different things. So I personally am all for it. And again, though, it's not just seeing numbers and not just seeing film. It's what am I going to do with that film?
That's right.
Am I humble enough to just say, you want to know something? I was in the wrong position there. Because unfortunately, I know people in power positions, teaching, officiating, CEOs, that it's my way, that's the way I'm doing it. And they're not learning from it where it's spelled out in front of them. So like I said, I'm always still trying to hone my craft and learn and get better because I want the best experience for those kids. I want my son to not remember the officials, but to remember the game. And hey, maybe those officials helped you remember the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen the trend in, you mentioned athletes, and this is great because we should be looking at what athletes are doing, what players and coaches are doing, because they're probably just a few years ahead of where we are with officiating as it comes to applying technology, right? So look at advanced metrics. Advanced metrics are very helpful for players, for coaches to figure out how to play the game. However, what we find sometimes is an over-reliance on advanced metrics where we lose a connection to actually watching a game and making the right decisions. So as we continue to introduce more data into how we officiate and into how we manage officials, it's going to be really important for us also to keep that hands-on approach where you're using the data, but you're putting it through the filter of a human being that's able to make decisions. It reminds me of the Toyota production system, which is a very well-researched manufacturing process that made Toyota kind of the creme de la creme of industrial feats. And one of the concepts in the Toyota production system is a word called Jacoda. And what Jacoda means is automation with a human touch. So even at Toyota, when they decided, okay, we're going to really improve how we build these cars and have an automated process, they always have the automation connected to a human being on the floor overseeing it. And I think that's something that's going to be important as we think about officiating. Yes, we'll automate things, but the human touch is always going to be there in order for it to lead to a better outcome. So, yeah, I'm really excited about the technology in the future, because this is exactly what RefMasters is here for.
That's great stuff, Sony. It really is. Well, we've kind of come up to that 50-minute mark here, so I don't want to hold you much longer here.
Sure.
So with the last thing, where can my listeners find you? Give a little shout to all your different sites and stuff like that. How can they find RefMasters? Where do they find it once again?
Yeah. Well, what I would recommend is to find us at www.refmasters.app. If you go to that page, you'll be prompted very quickly to create an account. It takes less than 1 minute. You could use your Google or Facebook, or if you have an iPhone, Apple credentials, to create your account,
Okay.
and you're in. That's all you need to know. Refmasters.app. Go there, create an account, and immediately you'll see the discussion spaces for football, for baseball, for basketball. We have a premium program called RefMasters University. It's a $30 a month program. You get weekly film sessions in all three of the sports. You
Okay.
get recordings, our entire content library. And also, one last thing in there, Michael, we have a certificate program. So every 3 months, as you attend the sessions and you take the quizzes, you can earn certificates in the form of a badge on your profile. So now when people see your profile in RefMasters, let's say decision makers like signers or coordinators, they'll see also the certificates that you've earned. It's a great way to demonstrate where you are as an official, your commitment to excellence.
Yep.
So that's a premium thing. But if you're not in RefMasters, www.refmasters.app, create an account, and I'm right there. You can feel free to message me, Sony Tiwari, and I'd love to greet you and do anything I can to help you out.
Sony, once again, I truly do appreciate that. Appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. I'm definitely going to have all that stuff into the show notes, and I'll have it on the different message boards and whatnot. Again, thank you very much. Enjoy your warm weather right now. I am highly jealous of that. But
Yeah,
thank you once again for taking your time out this evening and jumping on the show.
I appreciate you having me on, and I really appreciate what you're doing here. 1 year as a podcast is really a feat. Everyone can start a podcast. To keep it going, to continue growing it, and what you're doing is really important for the officiating community. So I really want to commend you for that. Thank you for having me on. And for everyone out there, look forward to seeing you in the RefMasters app.
All right. Make sure you go on there, find RefMasters, find it on Google Store, find it in the App Store, the Apple Store, all those different spots, and
Mhm.
find me on Spotify and Apple too, and join in with both. So once
That's right.
again, Sony, RefMasters, Whistle Talk, hopefully putting some good things together for you. I appreciate it. Have a good night, everybody. Take care.